Yeah, we're looking at problem clients no more. Before we start, as usual, just a quick introduction for those who don't know me. I'm Steve. I'm one of the co-founders here at the agency Works, and I've been working with agencies for well over 20 years now. And as usual, I'm joined by my webinar co-host Kate, who is one of the principal consultants here, but also has many years' experience working in client services teams at agencies before joining us here at the agency Works. So I'm sure, Kate, this is a topic that is very familiar to you.
It is indeed very close to my heart, this one.
Absolutely. So I'm sure we've all been there, clients who move the goalposts, your late night demands, endless amends, impossible expectations, the WhatsApp messages to remind you that they've sent another email. Challenging clients aren't just annoying, they're a threat to your survival and can be a risk to your revenue. And you know it can't go on. You're losing sanity, time, money, and potentially talent. They're a cost to your agency, and things need to change before that problem client turns into a formal one. So, in this morning's session, we'll be looking at the psychology behind difficult client behavior, how to redirect and resolve, non-negotiable boundaries you need to set, tips for tackling challenging conversations, and potentially when you should walk away. Now, as usual with these webinars, I like to caveat it with a lot of the stuff we cover today may feel obvious, and the chances are that you're already doing a lot of it, but it's always worth reinforcing the fundamentals and taking a fresh look at how we approach our client management. So to start with, I'd like to introduce you to a few people that you might find familiar. First client, the bad briefer, uses your team like a dumping ground for random ideas. You have two bullet point briefs. They use terms like make it pop or let's make it cool. Next client leaves it to the last minute to brief you, sends amends the night before it's due, but obviously expects it first thing in the morning. And then the scope crawler frequently adds just one more thing and assumes that everything is part of that original deal.
And not forgetting the ghost. So these are the ones that disappear for days and weeks after saying everything was fine, and then they magically return with urgent feedback and unexpected requests, or even massive changes to everything they said was originally looking good. And then how about but you're my supplier client who's very transactional. They push for discounts, question every quote, consistently compare you to cheaper options because obviously you're just a supplier and you're replaceable. And then lastly, there's the perfecter. So already knows what they want it to look like in their own head. And what you produce isn't going to then hit the mark. And then they say that they wouldn't necessarily have done it that way. And then they probably just rewrite the copy themselves anyway. So I think these are great, these personas, and I think they would make a really good game of like Guess Who or something like that. Because obviously I'm sure that you guys could probably think of a few more to add to them.
And if you're really lucky, I think you get a combination of all of them together.
Yeah, absolutely.
But bit of a reality check. This is an incoming truth bomb. You don't have a client problem, you have a client management problem. So blaming the client is too easy, and you could actually be setting them up to fail. Because those problem client behaviors are often the result of unclear rules, lack of boundaries, or overly flexible systems, all things that you control. And you need to control them because they are a cost to your business.
Yeah, exactly, Ben. And we all know the importance of happy clients for your agency. And in a recent What Client Thinks 2025 report from Up to the Light, we've pulled out this very telling quote, which is arguably the biggest difference between agencies is not found in the quality of thinking and creative output, but in the quality of their client relationships. So, where does it all go wrong? Now, we're agency experts, not psychologists, but in our time, the stories we've heard and the things we've seen have shown there are a few key reasons why good clients start to go bad. And the first one would be sort of different expectations. So the client expects more than what the agency can deliver in the given budget or time, making it hard for the agency to meet those client expectations.
Next, when you have shifting goals, so this is kind of when things chop and change, typically mid-project, without the corresponding adjustments, whether that be in the brief, in the scope, in timelines, or more importantly, in budget.
And different visions. So the client and the agency have different ideas about what the work is meant to achieve. And so there is no clear idea of what good should look like.
This one never happens. Scope three, the client continually adds new tasks or requests that weren't agreed upon in the original scope, and then your agency ends up over-servicing, and then what follows is awkward conversations to explain the where, the when, the why, and the how.
Absolutely. And this one will be a familiar one to a lot of you as well. So, too many stakeholders. So, excuse me, multiple people with conflicting opinions, slowing down that decision making, and that can cause confusion. So, and what will happen also is the agency will get caught in sort of cross-departmental tensions or power struggles between the client. So, if the client potentially is unclear on their own strategy, the agency in turn are going to get mixed signals. And you know that old phrase, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Absolutely. Or there might be just a simple lack of trust. They don't trust your agency's expertise and they second guess every decision. If you're only seen as a supplier, sometimes the client can withhold key information or insights that would help your agency make much better decisions.
Or it could be something quite simple like poor communications. So they aren't getting updates from you, or they're ghosting you entirely, which is going to disrupt the process and timelines.
Or there might be a simple disconnect. The working styles, the values, or the pace of your agency and client don't align. Maybe they're looking for something different, more hands-on, or different specialization altogether. So it's also worth acknowledging that they may be carrying baggage from previous agency relationships, making them perhaps over cautious or perhaps just simply defensive.
Or maybe your onboarding is poor. So, if the relationship didn't start with strong foundations of mutual understanding and agreed ways of working or boundaries, then you've not set the tone early on what that working relationship is going to look like in the first place. And as we said, we play a role in shaping what your relationship looks like, consciously or not. But the good news is that you have the keys, and the power is in your hands. So you need to think about onboarding new clients correctly, and managing those clients' relationships correctly as well. And remember, you can train them to be good clients. So you can train them to make sure that they're delivering good briefs or making sure they're giving you clear amends and timely responses, things like that.
Yeah, so I think on that, it's around setting the tone early, as Kate said, and we've picked out a few tips for how we might do that. So from day one, I think we need to frame the relationship as collaborative. So clients who see you as a strategic partner are more likely to respect your process and trust your guidance. Also, use tools like disc profilings or perhaps more informal observations to understand how different stakeholders communicate, make decisions, but also handle pressure. So this will help you tailor your approach for smoother interactions, and you'll know how to navigate conversations for better outcomes. Yeah, this is a key one. Clients don't always know what you need to do great work. So can we provide templates, briefing checklists, or maybe short briefing sessions to prevent misalignment and save time when reduce revisions? So we need to train them how to be a good client. Next, whether it be briefing requirements, documentation and resources, response windows, communication channels, project timelines, payment terms, we need to agree the rules and set these in writing. If they know about your policies up front, it hopefully will avoid friction later. But policies are worthless if you don't enforce them, so we need to make sure that we're sticking to our guns. Next, we need to remember that good project plans aren't just internal, it's a client tool too. To tell them when you need things and remind them in advance of a deadline. Get them to agree, to commit to it. and also explain the impact if they miss a deadline. So clients are more likely to respect your process if they understand how it benefits them, whether that be through faster delivery, better quality, or less delays. Again, another key one, explaining the difference between how amends work and how they're managed. So a clear defined scope at the start of the project and a clear scope change process avoids endless tweaks and helps clients prioritize meaningful feedback. Finally, set a rhythm for communication. Weekly calls, monthly reviews, quarterly strategic meetings. The consistency reduces surprises, builds trust, while also reinforcing structure and that strategic partner relationship.
Some excellent tips on onboarding new clients there,
Thank you,
then.
Kate.
You're welcome. But what about your existing clients? So for these, we need to focus on progress, not problems, and shift that energy from sort of your firefighting towards forward momentum. So this would be a good process to start with. So first of all, looking at running a partnership check-in. So this isn't a project review. This is more sort of hosting how are we working together session, and framing it around a partnership, not performance. And that is going to reduce any sort of defensiveness that you might get. And within that, reaffirming your shared goals. So remind the client of the bigger picture that you're working towards together, not just those current deliverables spoke about a moment ago. And that reconnecting to the why can help build alignment and motivation on both sides. So, you're working together. Things to ask would be what's working well, what's feeling clunky or unclear, and what would make this partnership stronger. And then think about asking for 360 feedback. So inviting honest input about the team, your processes, your communication, but also offer to reciprocate. So this mutual reflection helps uncover any sort of misalignments, and strengthens the relationship by showing your humility and your openness. And then reflecting on recent work. So think about doing an internal review as well. Are you delivering what you promised? Are you on brief? Are you proactive enough? Are you estimating correctly? So catching and correcting issues yourself before the client raises them doesn't just help with things like your utilization and your capacity, but it can also build your credibility. And then review and refine the process. So look at one or two workflows improvements that you can make immediately. So for example, giving better brief templates or clearer timelines, maybe more focused meetings, and tell the client that you're doing it in response to their feedback. And then this proactivity will be noticed. And then once you've finished all of those sort of 5 points of the process, start at the beginning and repeat again. I've also got a bit of a tip at the bottom of the page here, which is just switch perspectives with a fresh face. So we used to do this a little bit at my old agency, when you've got a client for a long time and you've got that same person, it can sometimes just be good to introduce maybe a new account manager or a new strategist, something like that. This doesn't have to be a long-term thing, it's temporary. But what it does is it kind of brings fresh eyes and renewed energy, or it can often reset the tone, and maybe uncover any overlooked issues. And it also shows improvement, commit to any sort of improvement.
Really. But we all know that sometimes things don't go as planned or run as smoothly as they should do. And sometimes we do need to react. So how do we navigate those challenging times with clients? We produced this process, which you might find useful. And obviously, we're going to be sending this across to you after the webinar, so no need to scribble down. But if we walk through it, the first thing we need to do before responding emotionally or defensively is gather the facts. So we need to review what was delivered, what was said, and what was documented. Understand the trigger. Was it unmet expectations, poor communication, misaligned deliverables? Check your own role as well and where your team may have contributed to the breakdown. So we need to take time to separate out the facts from emotion before reacting.
Absolutely. And then, excuse me, aligning with your internal team. So getting aligned on the narrative. So what's your perspective and what is the desired outcome? And then make sure it's just assigning one spokesperson. So avoiding mixed messaging or multiple voices responding to the client. You need to be a united front, not to have internal disagreement spilling into the client space.
And then it's about acknowledging it early. So reaching out promptly and calmly, acknowledge their frustration without being defensive. Clarify your intention to resolve, not argue. But we need to set up a call. Never try to resolve these complex issues over email alone. You could say something along the lines of, we hear your concerns and we'd like to take you through how we can move forward productively.
And then having a structured conflict conversation here, we can use the RRR framework, which Steve is going to go through with you in just a minute. But just to sort of summarize, we think we want to be starting with empathy, show that you're listening and that you care about their experience. Clarify what's gone wrong from their point of view and don't jump to defend. Make sure that you share your point of view calmly with facts and clarity, and then make sure that you collaboratively agree on the fixes. Focus on the solutions, not the blame.
Then we need to revisit and clarify key boundaries. That could be the scope, it could be feedback windows, communication deliverables. Document any changes in a shared written summary. That could be over email or potentially in a kind of revised project plan. And if needed, introduce new tools or rituals, clearer timelines, regular check-ins, and as Kate mentioned before, perhaps a new point of contact.
And follow up. So make sure you're taking immediate and visible action on any agreed next steps. This will rebuild trust by doing what you say, make sure it's fast and consistent, and keeping the tone proactive and future focused in all of those follow-ups.
And then schedule a short how's it going check-in. Invite honest feedback, what's better, what still needs to work. Keep the door open for continued improvement. Shows appreciation and also shows appreciation for their collaboration.
And last one is learn and document those lessons. So first of all, make sure you're debriefing your team, what triggered the conflict, what worked and what didn't. And then make sure you document the lessons and update any sort of processes that you have, things like onboarding or maybe templates. And this will help prevent, not help prevent any sort of future issues.
But if we do have to, we mentioned in navigating those kind of challenging conversations with clients, the 3R framework is a well-known model for tackling tricky conversations with a solution-driven mindset to achieve best outcomes for all. The first stage, redirect, is reminding them of the original plan. For example, just circling back to the scope that we agreed in week 1. Next, we move into reinforce. That's using evidence or reasoning. So you could say something like, expanding into this feature means we'd be cutting time from launch prep. And then finally, we've got resolve, offer a next step. You could say, we can schedule a phase 2 scope review, or we could park it for later. So if a client suddenly asks for new features 2 days before launch, instead of panicking or saying no, we could say, I totally get why this feels urgent. Here's what we can realistically deliver by launch, and here's what we propose for phase 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key to those sort of neutral language shifts could be, an example could be we recommend versus we were wondering. So avoid being defensive and sort of reiterating that point of view. So maybe a weak example would be, we're just checking in on this again, whereas a strong one would be, we're ready to move forward once we have X by the end of the day.
But if you're doing all these things and something is still not right, these are some of the red flags to look out for. The first is when a client always asks for out of scope work and ignores those boundaries without acknowledgement. This pattern will be detrimental to your agency's productivity and also future capacity planning.
Absolutely. And so, and disrespect towards your team. So any sort of microaggressions, dismissive tones in meetings, or maybe undermining junior staff. These are all signs of an agency client disconnect. And I think we have to remember that mutual respect is absolutely fundamental.
And that also goes through not only the relationship, but kind of the payment. So chronic delays, vague excuses, will pay you when X is done tactics are definitely signs of you're our supplier attitude and not a partner.
Yeah. And looking out for those transactional interactions. So if the client sort of treats you as an order taker and refuses any of your excellent strategic input, they may not be interested in the same sort of valuable partnership. So your time and energy could be viewed as more of a one-off business transaction rather than that the oh my God, I've got my words. Looking for that supplier, not non-supplier sort of relationship.
We know what you meant, Kate.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, if your team dreads calls with certain clients or loses motivation after working on their account, take it seriously. You can't afford to lose talent that makes your agency so successful.
And also looking at if your profitability is always slipping with that client. So here's where you could look at an excellent tool, maybe something like Synergist to track that real-time profitability across all of your client targets and spend. And if you use something like that, you'll soon be able to spot the accounts that are losing money and draining energy, which is obviously a double loss.
Great advice. And then finally, clients who won't engage in reviews, ignore your feedback loops, or constantly push back on the process you agreed in their onboarding will be harder to collaborate with and be more of a mission to control.
And if you are spotting several of these red flags, things you kind of need to think about doing is making sure that you're documenting everything, all the good, the bad, and the ugly, as you'll need to show evidence. You have done all you can to prevent or minimize impact on the agency client relationship. And it's probably worth considering raising, well, it is definitely worth considering raising any of your concerns with leadership before anything really gets too late.
But at the end of the day, we're only human. You need to separate the person from the problem. Bad apples are rare. Nobody turns up to work and chooses chaos. Just remember, you have more power than you think to change things for the better. And the good news is, it's not too late to start. Now, we've covered a number of topics in this morning's webinar, and as usual, we like to leave you with our 3 key takeaways. For me, the first one is about challenging client behaviour. It's often the result of unclear expectations, poor onboarding, weak boundaries, or inconsistent communication. Before blaming the client, ask, have we trained them how to work with us?
And second one there, boundaries are a leadership tool, not a last resort. So making sure you manage your client relationships, proactively setting expectations and defining roles, and also reinforcing scope. These are all essential to protect your team, your profitability, and your sanity.
And then finally, conflict doesn't need to be argumentative. Clear, calm conversations backed by structure and empathy build trust. Train your clients, guide them early, and then use frameworks like the 3R framework, redirect, reinforce, resolve, to handle those more difficult moments with much more confidence. So that brings us to the end of today's short session. I hope you found it useful. Obviously, we'll send across a copy of the recording, as I mentioned previously, if you want to share it with any of the members of your team. Please do connect with us. If you've got any further questions, then you can, as we said, connect on LinkedIn or via the Agency Works. And if you like today's session, then you might be interested in our next webinar, which is titled No Fear Project Financials. And we'll be delivering that on Tuesday, the 24th of June. This webinar, along with all other webinars, are also available on our YouTube channel, along with our popular A-game series. So if you want to kind of dive into some more insights, head to our YouTube channel, or you can get other insights from the Agency Works website too. So thanks once again for joining us. Thank you, Kate, for joining me once again, and
Thanks,
hope you all
Steve.
have a good day.
Cheers.